All right, you guys. So Nintendo Switch 2 conversation rumors leaks have been happening for a long time, and this isn't the first year. We saw it last year, 2022. Even as back as the first year that the Switch launched, there was immediate conversation of when can we expect next hardware. Now, in the year 2023, it's starting to feel like everyone is on the same page that the Nintendo Switch is on its way out, and by 2024, we should be at least expecting to hear an announcement, a release date, something about the Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo Switch Pro, whatever the successor to the Nintendo Switch is going to be. A lot of us are on the same page that it should be dropping next year. Well, I just want to ask the question of what if it doesn't happen? What if the Nintendo Switch pushes on and we don't get anything till at least 2025? A lot of people looked at the last direct that we had and said that that's a huge signal, that's a huge flag that it's pretty much go time for the next console because a lot of those games weren't really like the heavy hitters like the Tears of the Kingdoms or the Mario Odysseys. And I get that. My thing that really I take away from that direct was the fact that everyone said there's going to be nothing big from Tears of the Kingdom. People said Pikmin 4 is going to be their last like real first party release, and then after that they're just going to trickle out some like more low key releases. And I feel like Super Mario Bros. Wonder is not really a low key release. I feel like all the people who had heard that Tears of the Kingdom was gonna be the last big game did not know about Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Because I think we can all agree that for the Nintendo Switch, 2D Mario is a big game. So I feel like there's a lot of mystery and there's still a lot of secrets that Nintendo is holding away from everybody. So let me be clear. I do believe that the next Nintendo Switch hardware is coming out in the year 2024, or at least we're going to hear about it in 2024. But I am starting to wonder. Nintendo likes to do things that we never expect, and once everyone thinks they really understand what Nintendo's doing, they go out and drop the weirdest things, or they go out and do the most unexpected. I've been racking my brain thinking what would possess Nintendo not to drop hardware. Because, I mean, the evidence is pretty clear that this hardware that they're currently using is very outdated. It struggles to run 30 frames per second sometimes, and some people would argue it's holding back some really good games like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Bayonetta 3. Some would even say Tears of the Kingdom is being held back by the hardware. Now, what would be a good reason for them to say let's continue using this outdated hardware when you have things like the PlayStation 5 holding 60 frames per second on a majority of their first party games, when you see things like Starfield, this huge open massive world on the Xbox console, or these new crazy graphic cards that PCs are sporting. What would make Nintendo think that their tablet from 2015 holds a candle to the hardware that we currently have in other consoles? And that's what got me thinking. Nintendo doesn't sell their brand off their hardware. Their hardware isn't really the reason why you buy their system. Whether it's a kooky idea, whether it's a great idea, whatever the hardware is, that's not really the reason, that's not really the selling point behind Nintendo. Their selling point is their IPs. I think a lot of people are going to want to say, well, they already released their two big Zelda games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, on this console. They already released their 3D Mario game, Super Mario Odyssey, plus the expansion to Super Mario 3D World with Bowser's Fury. They already released their Splatoon 3s, their Xenoblades, their Fire Emblems. What else could Nintendo release that'll be worthy of extending this hardware beyond 2024? Well, I think there's the obvious ones. You know, you can make a Star Fox game. You can make the Donkey Kong game. Games and IPs that we haven't seen in a long time. And I think there is an audience for it within the fan base of Nintendo. Similar to what they did with Metroid, where they kind of reinvigorated the franchise. Even same thing with The Legend of Zelda, where Skyward Sword was not really the big talk of the town that Breath of the Wild became. So, is it too out of the box? Is it too wild to say that they might drop a Star Fox game and a Donkey Kong game to push this hardware even further? I don't think so. I think personally, if they drop those games, people would still go out there and buy those games. They would still invest into this hardware for those games alone. whether it be nostalgia, whether it be the fact that you want to see these franchises reinvigorated, whatever the reason, I definitely believe there's still IPs Nintendo hasn't touched. Not to mention ideas they still haven't really utilized like to their fullest. Things like 3D Mario. But ultimately, software is always going to sell for Nintendo. Their fan base loves their content and always buys their games. The problem though isn't with the software, it's with the hardware. A lot of people are going to sit there and say that Nintendo Switch games are phenomenal and they'd be that much better if they're running on current gen hardwares, if they can target 60, if they can run stable 30 frames per second, if their resolution wasn't 720 blurry. And I get that. And now those critiques are starting to show in Nintendo Switch hardware sales. Nintendo Switch hardware sales have been on a huge decline this entire year. They've ran to the point where they literally sold their console to everybody who wants it. And now they're kind of just the outliers who are buying multiple consoles, like 2 or 3 Nintendo Switches. So any way you look at it, Nintendo has to drop some kind of more current gen hardware sometime in the near future. There's only so much people that are going to want to buy this current console, and every year they don't release one, the gap between the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and the new graphic cards in PC are starting to widen between the Nintendo Switch. And if Nintendo Switch doesn't want to rest on their laurels, if Nintendo doesn't want to have a repeat mistake that they've had with the Wii, then they'd be smart in considering dropping next hardware in 2024. With all that being said, what's the holdout? What's the reasoning behind not selling or not making new hardware yet? This last June that just passed, was the best June for Nintendo Switch software sales in Japan ever since release. They're still breaking records 6-7 years into their console generation, which is unheard of. The fact that they can still drum up all this hype around games that are running on 2015-year-old tablet hardware, that to me is still mind-blowing. That's an astonishment and a true testament to Nintendo's abilities to create games that their fan base loves. And I feel like when you start to see numbers like that, I get why you would want to be hesitant to making the next console. If Nintendo Switch was to make a harder console, expectations would rise. No longer would people accept 720. No longer will people accept 30 frames per second. They would have to make their games at a better resolution, at a better frame rate. They would expect bigger games, and all of that takes money. A lot of that takes time. It took them 6 years to get Tears of the Kingdom to run as smoothly as they can on a Nintendo Switch. If the next big Zelda game is going to have to get bigger than Tears of the Kingdom, who knows how long the development cycle will be. So I understand why they would want to be hesitant to dropping their next hardware. And I think when you look at the PlayStation 5, when you look at the Xbox Series X and S, I think a lot of their first party games are phenomenal. They run better, they look better, they feel better sometimes. They're bigger and better games. But that doesn't always reflect in profits. Nintendo Switch has been making money hand over fist this console generation. A lot of that is due to the fact that people buy their games, but a lot of it is also due to the fact that they're able to release games at a rate that PlayStation 5, that Xbox Series consoles could only hope to release at. They release games practically every month, and a lot of those games sell really well. So with their current hardware, they're able to have smaller development times, they're able to have smaller budgets, and they're able to sell more than the games on PlayStation 5, on Xbox Series X. We just heard that Horizon Forbidden West and Last of Us Part 2 had a budget of $200 million plus, not to mention marketing. So when Nintendo hears those numbers, they see those numbers and they see the return on investment. I don't think they see what we see as consumers. I think we as consumers say, okay, we want a game that could run 60 frames per second or at least hit 30 frames per second consistently. What they see is dollar bills. They see if they release new hardware, the expectation has risen. They're gonna have to take longer to develop these games, and they're gonna have less leeway with their fan base on things like graphics, on things like performance. Again, people are going to expect more, and Nintendo's going to have to rise to that occasion. They're obviously ready for it. They obviously have the talent that can make these games in a good rate, running well, looking well. They have that talent. We know that. The question is, what's the driving factor? I think October 20th, they're going to drop Super Mario Bros. Wonder neck and neck with Spider-Man 2. Anyone looking at those two games knows Spider-Man 2 has a way bigger budget and probably a longer development time. I guarantee you Super Mario Bros. Wonder is going to outsell Spider-Man 2. And that's Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man is a big IP. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is going to outsell it. At a lower budget, at a lower development time. What is the driving factor to releasing another hardware when their software, again, speaks a mind of its own? I still personally believe Nintendo Switch successor, whatever, might be releasing 2024. I just don't think it's going to be the successor that people want it to be. I don't think it's going to be a big 4K tablet or anything like that. I think it's just going to be a slightly better Nintendo Switch, similar to what we saw with the Nintendo Switch OLED. I think this newer console would be more like an update to the console you have for those interested in running these games at better frame rates or better graphics. But I don't think they're going to release the next like Nintendo Switch 2 per se. And I think that's also evident when you see things like Tears of the Kingdom that just released. When you think of games like Super Mario Bros. Wonder that are going to sell really well, not just on day one, but over time. They're releasing a lot of games that have really long legs. And I just don't see a reason why you'd want to cut those legs short by moving on to next hardware, where they're going to have to take time to figure out a way to make those games either run on it or add backwards compatibility to the next, whatever their next system is. Again, I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for Nintendo to cut and make a whole new console, even with backwards compatibility. It just doesn't financially make too much sense when their software sells really well. The fan base that has a Nintendo Switch, that plays games on Nintendo Switch, don't really care about graphics, don't really care about performance. They tout things like Bayonetta 3, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Tears of the Kingdom as the best experiences in gaming currently for the years of 2023, 2022, or whatever. They don't see things like Horizon, God of War. They don't see things like Starfield and get super excited. That's not what their fan base likes to play. So if you've been making money all this time, not on graphics, not on performance, but on game design and just overall having fun, the way games kind of should just be really marketed as, then what would be the reason for you moving to stronger hardware? You've cultivated the audience that you know is going to stick around regardless of performance, regardless of graphics. So I don't know. At this point, I'm just ranting on about the same thing. I don't think they really feel the urge to need to drop the next console. Overall, those are my thoughts on whether or not Nintendo Switch needs to come out with the next successor. But if we're talking about what if they don't, I don't think anything is going to really change. I think Nintendo's still going to be Nintendo, and their fans are still going to love them, whether they drop hardware or not. So again, I don't think that really changes much. I think the big thing is just, what's the reason? You know, Nintendo needs a reason to drop a hardware. They said that multiple times over and over again. There needs to be a big reason as to why they're doing this. And right now, their software is selling really freaking well on their hardware that's currently provided. Why, you know? Do me a favor and like this video if you guys like this video. Dislike it if you don't. It is what it is. Please consider subscribing, as it does help me out tons. And with that, I'll see you guys on the next video.